Welcome back to episode 3 of The Tech Entrepreneur. Today we are joined by Dave Hughes, CEO and founder of Novosound. Hi Dave, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks for having me on this.
Pleasure, thank you for joining us today in the Unicorn Bar.
Yes, nice and fancy.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we love a neon sign in the Clear Sky office, as I'm sure you
$1 billion bar, I guess is the connection.
See what you did there. Dave gets it, right? Dave gets the $1 billion concept. We explained this to our digital marketing expert who didn't get what a unicorn was. So yeah, it was quite a bit of explaining that we needed to do to Josie.
Yeah, and we make unicorns. That's what we do at Clear Sky. So that's where it comes from.
Thanks for joining us. Can we start by hearing a little bit about yourself and indeed give us the Novosound pitch?
Novosound is a company I founded 7 years ago now, after 15 years of being an academic and very much a recovering academic now. So still get the shakes when I go by university, but try and stay away from them quite often because I was doing PhD and then into research into ultrasound sensors and got bored of being an academic, so decided to continue that work but in the real world, so created Novosound. Did a seed round back in 2018, 6 people, we've now grown to 40 people with a mission of ultrasound integrated everywhere. And what that really means is we make ultrasound sensors, you know, ultrasound from the hospital, but we take it everywhere by integrating into client solutions. So a bit like a CRO, so like a contract research organisation, but doing hardware and manufacturing ultrasound sensors, just as say Glasgow, for industrial monitoring, so putting them on pipework for corrosion, erosion monitoring, put them into medical imaging systems for very high resolution imaging, and the big play we're doing at the moment is into wearables, consumer wearables for blood pressure detection on a smartwatch kind of form factor. It's the only thing your Apple Watch doesn't do, but we've got a sensor that can do it. So 7 years of progress in 7 years.
Nice.
Are you waiting for Apple to acquire you?
That would make me the unicorn. I guess. But they're quite a big entity to track down. So, but the roadmap's there is what we're trying to do.
So you went from the PhD academic background into the high pressure business environment.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
You get that asked of you all the time in terms of why would you want to be an entrepreneur, but the more I get into doing the tech entrepreneur stuff or building the business, I think, why the hell would you want to be an academic?
Oh, really? Good.
You know, and it's actually, there's I've got lots of friends who've stayed in the university system and they go up, become professors, and I thought I was going to do that. I think my mother would have been very happy if I'd stayed in a university environment, built a research career, published papers, got grants in, more papers, more grants. It's just not me. It's so slow and lots of bureaucracy that moving into the real world and doing the startup, you just get, it might take you 2 months to get approval to buy a flight to go to a conference in a university. Here I can just go on the plane and get to the place I need to go because that's what makes the business survive. So the pace of life in the real world as an entrepreneur is just more exciting to me. Whereas if the university, if you're more pacey or kind of slow paced, then it's fine for you. But I also wasn't a particularly brilliant scientist, so even though I would shoot for becoming a professor, I'm more on the talking about it and getting other people to do the science. So having a team of 40 behind me to actually do the science is much more in my style. And if I was still in university, I might have 3 people. So there's a whole kind of lots of reasons why I'm not an academic, but mainly it's just I got bored and wanted to actually have impact and get the technology into the real world and save lives, make sure the world's more efficient, more help the environment, all those things that's in our mission statement you can't do if you're just publishing papers all the time. So it's there's probably not an answer, but it's one of the motivations.
You see that quite a lot. There's like a frustration built up, whether it be in full-time employment or academia, and then the gloves are off when you go on your own. But it's also, I don't know, at least in my experience, very overwhelming. That just because you're good at the academic bit of it, then you've got kind of sales, marketing, operations, managing leaders who manage other people and messaging and communicate. Like there's, it feels like a therapy session, but there's a whole lot. Like, how did you go on that journey?
I think the best description I got of doing a startup is you're building the fire engine while going to put the fire out, and some people say it's building the plane while trying to take off, but. You do learn as you go along because I think my people skills are probably the thing that gets pushed to the limit most in this role because I'm not really a people person at all. But then you suddenly go from managing 6 people and you're all in it together. to 40 people, which means 40 people's life events and life stresses all come into work every day, and you just have to work out how to manage, I guess, by doing it rather than, I don't think you can learn it from a book. I don't think you can go on a course on people management and become the best people manager. I think you have to naturally do it to the level that you're able to do, and then hand it over to someone who's better at it than you. And luckily I've got people around me who are much better managers than I am. I only, out of the 40, I think only about 6 or 7 actually report to me. Okay. The rest are shielded, just from my bad moods or being me. But no, I think you learn it as you go along, but there's such a big bunch of generic skills that you can't learn until you're at the coalface of it, doing it. And I've learned that the hard way, it has to be said. There's been 7 years and, well, we've got 40 members of staff. There's another 40 who are no longer staff. You know, they had a job at Novosound, it was their current place of employment. They've gone on and done brilliant things. But there's been a lot of learning throughout that journey, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Going back to your the academic period of your life, was there a glimmer of the sort of entrepreneurial spirit coming through? Was that a plan at all, or did you just kind of stumble into it?
Yeah, so there's about 11 universities in Scotland, and they all operate in different bits of the market. So you get the more traditional ones, the St Andrews, not Oxford, that's England, St Andrews, Edinburgh, Glasgow, and they operate at what they perceive as the upper echelon of academia. I had my degree from Glasgow, went to Strathclyde, and then my research career after when I was starting to build my own group was at UWS, University of West of Scotland, which, it's a post-92 new university, and it has a function in the market of academia. It's not Glasgow, it's not Edinburgh, it's not St Andrews. And they'll openly admit that they play a different game to the more traditional red brick universities, but that's not to say that they're any worse off for it. The context there is that I had came from Dundee University to UWS to kind of reboot my career. I'd spent 4 years in Dundee University, and I don't look back on that fondly, so I needed to basically think that's not what I want to do. I was a physicist working in a biology lab. I like physics, hate biology. And they're completely different. I mean, physics is a real science, biology is more like English lit or something, I don't know. You're naming things, I guess. But so I had to get back into physics and reboot my career, and that's what UWS has a really good place in the market for early stage researchers who want to basically build a career. But the blocker there is because it's not an established long-term university, you don't get the major grants, you don't get what they call EPCERT grants, the physical sciences. So you have to get funding from more smaller sources but faster paced sources, which tends to be industrial funding. So businesses that want to work with universities, they put out a call saying, I've got this idea, do any of the universities want to try and develop it with me? And I used to just look at those and get £5,000 grant there, £10,000 there, just to do ultrasound research but with businesses rather than academics. And the more I was doing these grants, the more I was doing the same thing with the same sensors for different businesses. And I thought, well, this technology we have obviously has a place in the real world. Why am I pissing about with 5k grants constantly, writing a paper and going when you can actually be out? And I didn't really know how to do that at all until there was a company that came with what's known as an innovation voucher request, where they said, we want to put dehydration sensors on a wearable. This is back 2014, and it was a company called Snap40. Chris McCann, or Chris McGee as he's now known. So I worked with them, Chris and Stuart from Snap40, all about can you measure dehydration using ultrasound in a small wearable upper arm thing. It was early stage, but we got some really good results out, showed it worked, and it was just interesting and exciting to see what they were building as Snap40 at the time. I think they'd just won Scottish Edge and got 50k in. But then within 12 months, they'd raised like 1.5 million from Par Equity. They'd gone on, they then became Current Health, they then exited into this huge story. But seeing what they were doing back in 2014 as young entrepreneurs with just kind of building stuff, and I'd never experienced that, I'd never seen it before. And it got me thinking about maybe there is a way to take this technology to a wider place outside of a university. And the more you dug into that, got a Scottish Enterprise grant to commercialise my research, so £500,000 grant to recruit the early people. So Dan, Heather, there was Ivan came in, Dan and Heather are still with me to this day, and my co-founder Richard. I could pay him to do business planning because I did not know what a P&L was, did not know what a balance sheet was, no idea about raising investment, anything. Richard had been there and done that, so I was able to pay him to do 2 days a week to build a business plan. And then in April 18, we put it to the test, raised money with par equity and got out of the university. So while there was never any long-term plans as I was a child to be an entrepreneur, the last, from like 2013 through to 18, so 5 years of just trying to work out an exit strategy from an academic point of view to work out what is next, and taking that first step out of the university into the real world, that was quite a big thing.
And what was that like? What was the first 6 months of that? What did it look like? What did it feel like?
So that at that stage, I think the first 2 months we were still in the university, because you raise the money and then you have to find the property. You've now got money, so you can then get a lease on a place. We moved out to BioCity in month 2, and there were 6 of us: me, Richard, Dan, Heather, Ivan, and Gillian. And it was exciting because it was like a wee clubhouse almost, and like we're building something, 1.5 million in the bank, and a roadmap to try and sell 1,000 sensors a month by month 3, and that was never going to happen. And then it didn't. But the business model there, Richard was CEO, I was the CTO at the time, so it was me learning how to be a CTO and build a team in a new lab space, because if you're in a university, most of the time you walk into a room and the equipment's there, the facility is there, the janitor's there, the blue roll is already there for you. You then day one or in a new facility, like, right, we need to buy a lot more stuff than maybe we put in that budget. We weren't buying a bar or anything, but there was things like, where is the tea and coffee, where is the laptops, who's got the office license, all these things that seat at pants, just kind of trying to build it as you go along. And then I was full-time, Richard was 3 days a week as a CEO to basically guide the business, because par equity, we're not going to give 1.5 million to an academic who'd never done it before. So there was a lot of trying to learn how to be a founder of a business. So then the plan would always be that Richard would step aside and I would take over, because it was my research, it was my strategy, it was my idea of what we're doing, but it was that comfort of, he's not a business person. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and it's very obvious. So then Richard mentored me up to a point where in November 2020 I was able to take over he stepped aside and I became the CEO at that point. But between 2018, seed round, December 19, we did our Series A, all for a big growth year, huge year ahead in 2020. So we raised 3.3 million in December 19, and 2020 was so rosy.
Going so well, right? Hope nothing gets
5 years ago this week, the world just kind of flipped underneath, and at that point we were selling into aviation and oil and gas with sensors. Planes stopped flying, the oil barrel price went negative, and the business just was like, okay, let's see what happens next. And that was really the start of me pivoting the business away from the industrial towards the healthcare and getting back to what my passion is, which is biomedical ultrasound, all the wearables ideas, etc. COVID actually helped us move the business that way. With that big Series A raise, we just recruited a global chairman, a guy from Texas, or Scottish guy who was living in corporate America in Houston, Texas, was coming back to Scotland looking for portfolio companies, so he came on as our chairman, kind of saw how the business was running, and then said, right, we need to make the change to put Dave into CEO, Richard across into the board. He's still with us, but that's when the business became probably more like what the business is today, rather than what it was when it was trying to just sell ultrasound probes to lots of different markets at commodity pricing, and going more into this project, CRO, contract research, development house kind of thing, that we've really built a brand and a name and a team around. So, but it was, if that COVID period hadn't happened, I wouldn't have learned as much as I have. I wouldn't have the scars on my back, but I probably wouldn't be CEO. I don't know if Novosound would still be here if the pandemic happened, because we got absolutely no public support. We didn't get any grants, didn't get any furlough. We didn't furlough anybody, but we also didn't take in any public money. So we had to focus on getting customer money, and we had to become commercial very, very quickly. Even though we had the good cash balance, that only lasts so long on a burn. So we had to be much more commercial instantaneously. That's allowed us to continue to do what we do now.
So in terms of like that flipping to commercial side of it, did you bring someone in to help with that side of things? Because that's like one bit I've struggled in loads. But obviously Paul's here now, so it's a breeze compared to what it used to be. But like, as a founder, more like a CTO founder that I would have been, it's hard to move to commercial where, it's not going to be a perfection thing. It's like good enough to get revenue in, right?
Yeah, and that's the biggest learning curve I've had. And I know before we started recording, so if there's anything you say you want cut, so I'm just watching what I say here, because we've made a lot of mistakes hiring commercial people.
Oh, so
that's probably the most diplomatic. That's probably the most diplomatic way I can say it. There's been a lot of really good people that we've hired at the wrong stage of the business to allow them to do their job to the best of their ability. Yeah. And when you start the business, we had a head of commercial who was really good, came from a really good business in Scotland, but we didn't have anything that was set in stone to be sold. So if he's there trying to sell out of a catalogue, like, you have to write the catalogue, you have to actually work out what problems does this solve, because universities spin out a lot of the time come out with technology that can solve one problem, and that's the academics problem, and they think, oh, there's a huge market for this, and when you get into it, you go, no, there's 3 academics maybe in your field that will do exactly what you want, so you have to then look wider. So we had him for about a year and a half, and then it fizzled out. We tried again, another person, and I think we've gone through about 4 or 5 heads of commercial, and it's just never really worked up until we kind of reflected again and said, right, let's, rather than hiring in the shiny suited person, that the board maybe wants a CCO to come in with somebody with a track record, look at it from a point of founder-led sales. And I don't know if you've done the same journey, where there was a really great graph, and as an academic or physicist, I like a good graph. Nice. And this was a graph all about the revenue curve of a business and when you should be hiring salespeople. So like from 0 up to about $1 million of revenue, that should be founder-led. So that's me selling, because I know what the tech does and what's problems. So from 0 to $1 million. And we did that. So after 1 to maybe 1 million to about 3 million, then you bring in a salesperson. After you're in that third stage where you've now left founder-led sales, you've got a salesperson, you either promote them to CCO or you bring in a CCO to repeat, rinse and repeat. We would always bring that CCO person in at the bottom of that 0 to 1 curve, and it just doesn't work at all. And so if I was ever giving advice to startups, it would be like, just ignore any board member, investor, person that says the business has to look like this. Get a CCO until you can get to that $1 million of sales 2 years in a row, let's say. Yeah. On your own back. Now you can train somebody to be a salesperson who can then build a team around that you can bring a CCO to actually strategize how to grow it. If I'd have known that 7 years ago, things would be a lot better.
This is groundbreaking stuff for me.
But that's, I mean, we've done well out of that, and we're in that kind of transition into that second phase at the moment, where we're just trying to build the team to replicate what I've done on founder-led sales to continue to grow it. So we're not quite in the third phase yet, but hence we don't have a CCO.
In terms of that, so that technical background, passion, healthcare side of things, it can be quite difficult to say, okay, well, from 0 to 1 million, I'm just going to go and do sales, because it feels unnatural. I was the same. Like, I went into technology and technology teams and building products, and it's quite a hard pill to swallow, because you get lots of advice of, as a leader, find people that are great at something that you're only good at. Yeah. But then you're right, like, too early.
You don't know what the thing is that they're meant to be good at. Yeah. So, and I think a lot of the time with technology sales as well, you can either get to $1 million of sales by selling $1 million of a cheap thing, or one big expensive thing. Yeah. So at Novosound, we moved from trying to sell £1,000 probes and try and sell 1,000 of them, or however many, my maths isn't that great, to get to $1 million. Or you then switch to a project model and say, right, actually, if we get 4 contracts in this year that are 250k each, that's us at $1 million. We know what we're delivering to the customer, and then we grow them. The easiest money you can get is if you expand your existing customer base. Repeat customers are so much better than trying to get the new ones. But then if you bring in a CCO at the start when you've got no customers, they can't grow them, and they don't know what problem you're solving for them. If you get to that third phase and you've got existing customers that want to work with you again, you just hand them over, and it's now key account management and growth rather than something from nothing. So that's what we're trying to do at the moment.
Brilliant. Put it so simply. I should have talked to you 7 years ago.
I wish I'd spoken to myself 7 years ago. But again, it worked for Novosound for the last wee while, but it might not work for everyone. That's my caveat of any advice I'd give. The way I've done it is not how I would advise other people to do it now.
So in terms of that, building resilience as a leader, like a huge thing, right? Give me a couple of the biggest resilience builders that you've had.
Pandemic is quite a good way of building resilience. I wouldn't want to instigate another pandemic, but you learn a lot about when everyone else is just going home and going to ground to keep the business going. And while we had the benefit of being cash rich because we closed the Series A, you've still got a board wondering, should we just take that 3 million back? Should we pause? There was talk of, taking, at the time we were 15 people, should we strip that down just to keep it legal, pause for 6 months and come back and see where we're at? Which was the antithesis of what I wanted to do, because I was thinking if we pause for 6 months, I'll tell you where we are, and I will be handing you back 2.5 million rather than, because there'll be no business left.
Yeah.
So really had to convince that the strategy was to just knuckle down while the customers are away. Let's focus on innovation. All the stuff we've learned for the first 18 months of the business, let's learn from that as to what the customer and the market actually wants. Do innovation, develop the solutions. We went into the pandemic with prototypes, and we came out with products, because we could actually not have to go to trade shows, not have to go to customers, lots of video, lots of digital marketing to learn about the customer. And then we had the Kelpie, which is our flexible, it's a shape-changing ultrasound probe. So a Kelpie is a shape-shifting Scottish legend. Yeah. So is our product. So and Belinus, which is our high-temperature ultrasound probe. Belinus, Beltane, God of Fire. So it's all about high temperature. So we came up with this whole marketing thing of Scottish names to come out of the pandemic with it. If the pandemic never happened, we wouldn't have these products, and we wouldn't have built the thing off it. But then during those, going from like a monthly board meeting to a weekly board meeting, and then trying to fight for the careers of the 15 people in the team while growing it, that builds a lot of resilience. Yeah. But I think also resilience as a founder tends to be a lot of, how do I say it? I'm trying to remember what I used to say. It was something to do with passion without emotion. So if you can continue to get your point across passionately and really forcefully, but without showing any emotion, that gets you through a lot of resilience conversations. Because at the very early days, I still can be quite erratic and maybe get off the hinge sometimes. You have to learn to dial back that part of your personality and just focus on the passion rather than the emotion.
It's difficult though, but you want to be you.
Oh, yeah, and most of being an entrepreneur in the early stages, especially in Scotland, when you go on these entrepreneur courses, it's like, just be yourself, not like that, be yourself, not like that. And you think, Jesus, I just want to be myself. And at the time, maybe you dress more Tory or you dress more conservative to raise the money, and then you start to get to a point where you can be yourself more, but you have to earn it almost. And I don't know if I've earned it yet, maybe I'm just being cocky and being more of myself than who I was 7 years ago. But it changes you as you do the journey.
I find it quite difficult that, as a person, especially as a founder, it's kind of wild swings. Sometimes you'll be on top of the world, a deal got done, you'll be super positive about the future, everything's great.
5 minutes later.
Yeah, and it's going to be quite disconcerting for the team. They'll go, well, what's wrong with Darren? I'm like, we didn't hit whatever, or there's a problem I had to go and deal with. But it can be quite difficult for the people around you in that journey. But, so I've been trying to, there are still ups and downs, but I'm just trying to make them less of a lower amplitude of it.
Absolutely, and the swings are probably the thing that the team reacts to more. And there have been, there are horror stories that come out of Novosound, just because of me learning how to be a CEO and people getting caught up in my journey as much as their own journeys. And, I apologise to people who it has gone south with, but at the same time, there's resilience on my side, there's resilience on their side. We've got people with us that have been on 5 years, 6 years on the journey. We've had people who've lasted, I think our shortest is 2 days, but that was a housing problem more than anything else that I get told about. But then the swings around is part of that whole resilience. Dial back the emotion and keep the passion there. So even if I have to have a difficult conversation with the wide team, we do a Monday stand-up. Just last week I had to maybe read a bit of the Riot Act about how we're not delivering the way that we should be delivering, that you have to do it, but if they know where it's coming from, then they understand it and say, yeah, he's pissed off, but quite rightfully, if he's had to work the weekend smoothing over a client relationship, he's probably a bit annoyed that he lost his first weekend home after 3 weeks of travel to deal with stuff that should have been done the week before. So then that's not me airing laundry or anything, that's just part of it really. I know it's my life's work, it's not everyone's life work at Novosound, so yes, I should have to do the weekends more than anyone else, but if it's a crunch point with a client delivery, if I never tell the team about my disappointments, they'll just think everything's great all the time, and it'll hit much worse when things really go to shit. Whereas,
I think that's where the company's grown a lot, from being a small group of people, 6 people, to now like over 40, and as a leader, you have to grow alongside that, and sometimes you're a lot worse than what the company needs. Sometimes you're just about hitting what the company needs, and it kind of varies between it. But the only way to, so we talked earlier about management books and leadership books and all that sort of stuff. I've done the Audible journey, which is good. But a lot of the things that we learn as leaders is just getting it wrong. I've got something wrong in the last few weeks, and I'm like, how did I get that wrong? Like every indicator was telling me that was going to go well, and out of nowhere it's going like horribly, and you're like, well, okay, well now I've learned for the next time we do this, I'm going to have a different approach to it. But you don't know that until you get it wrong. Right?
No, absolutely, and I think if you do it wrong 2 or 3 times in a row and expect a different result, then you're just not learning. But being, especially a founder CEO, it's a journey. You aren't the same person at the end. People say, oh, it's a roller coaster. As if that's a roller coaster, you end up back where you started, and that shouldn't happen. It should be an elevated place. And that comes from all the mistakes and the fuck-ups and the screw-ups. I don't know if you can swear on this podcast, but anyway, it comes from all the screw-ups and the mess-ups and the things that you ruminate at 2 a.m, or, you know, just thinking I should have, or the shower fights you have that you lost, you know, all these things. But I think my style of leadership has changed, because when you're leading 6 people, 10 people, 20, you get these landmark points that you have to change. And it goes from like when you're really in the weeds, CTO, in the technical, knowing everything that's going on with everything in the supply chain, to then when you're 40 people, you can't know everything, and you have to have a larger degree of trust at the later part than the earlier part, which sounds counterintuitive almost, because when it's a smaller team, you can get in on. Is that me? Quiet on set. But you can kind of, I'm not sure, you have to think differently sometimes, that when it is a small team, yes, you have to trust your co-founders without a doubt. But if you have access to more information, you can get it for yourself. As the team gets bigger, you have to trust more that you're getting told the right pertinent story to get the business where it is. But then the team have to trust you more that you're making the right decisions for the strategic direction, if it's not the task itself. So I try and be as open as I can. Open door policy is the minimum part of it, but actually, as I say, if things are going wrong, or things are not meeting expectation, or things are going to become really difficult in the business, I make sure the whole company, they damn well know it, that's when you get it wrong, but they understand where the challenges ahead are, so they can understand where they might need to lean on a wee bit more. And if you hide it, you know, there's some train of thought that says just keep it all to yourself and just kind of keep it going. That doesn't help anyone, because you will burst, and that's when the real explosions can happen. I think if you just have see being CEO founder as being just an ongoing conversation with your team, good and bad, then it's a more open style of leadership. Some people hate it because I don't want to know. I just want to come and do everything. Other people like to know everything, because, you know, but finding that leadership style for different areas or times in the business is critical to this.
I think it can be difficult at times, because being the CEO founder, you're basically a chief problem officer, and there must be times where you see something breaking. You've been there since the beginning. You see part of the business breaking, and your immediate intention is to go and problem solve. Yeah. How do you avoid that?
That's one of the hardest parts. But if you get into the headspace of, if you're constantly going in and solving the problem, people then look at you and say, it's fine, Dave will do it. And in the early days, when you are in nuts and bolts and it needs to be done to keep, you know, building the fire truck, as I say, you have to do it. At this stage, you know, there's things that you instruct or you want to happen, and you sit there and you say, I've told them to do it, and then you can just see it not happening or not meeting it. You could jump in and say, right, no, I'm going to micromanage this to get it where it needs. Or you sit back and let it happen and then have the conversation. That only works if you're sure that they've been told how, they've been given the tools to do what you want. There's no point telling somebody where to go if you're not giving them any directions as to how to get there. If you have given them directions and they know where to go and they don't make it, then you can let it fail and then have the discussion to get them better. It's more, maybe that's I used to do, in the academic world, I used to do a lot of lecturing and teaching, you know, so I've always had that as part of my career, to teach people. I'm not the best lecturer, I'm not the best teacher in the world, but I understand more about how people learn than maybe if I was a founder CEO who didn't have a lecturing or an education background. So I think, as I say, you can't tell people where to go, not give them directions, and then be surprised when they fail. You have to give enough support that they get it, but then don't jump in and solve all the problems, because then that'll just be the default behaviour and you'll still be solving problems, when ultimately you should be hiring problem solvers and the right problem solving.
Yes, so true. You mentioned 3 weeks of travel earlier. I'm always very envious of your LinkedIn profile, because every time I refresh my feed, you're in some other amazing country or city of the world. business? Is it
All business.
marketing? I didn't mean for pleasure, but is it?
Are you an influencer?
Is it business meetings? Is it exhibitions? Is it both? What's taking you to these wonderful places in the world?
So my view when it comes to doing business development and sales is you have to meet people. It's all, especially if you're doing development projects. If you're just selling widgets, you can just sell it via Amazon, via transactional. But if you're doing collaborative development where if we are effectively becoming the ultrasound tech team for our clients, we work with their departments, you have to feel like you're part of their business. You can't do that via Zoom. We tried it during the pandemic, everybody went remote. You lose that human connection that, especially in America, businesses are much more on personal connections rather than just like, more in Europe, you can maybe get away with it, but we don't sell much in Europe. So doing the travel is all about seeing the whites of the eyes, getting that personal relationship, the side conversations that never happen on a Zoom call. Absolutely. And just working that so Novosound becomes really embedded with our clients. That means the client come on the journey with us, the relationship lasts longer, they're more fruitful. But it is a lot of travel. So it was 3 weeks before. This is the longest stretch I've actually been in Scotland for probably 3-4 years or so, and that's only 4 weeks.
So how do you balance that with life outside?
I don't mind.
You don't have one?
I try, and it's difficult, but it's trying to keep the eye on the prize that if we do this right, then life will be much, much better when we get to that point that we can take the foot off the gas a little bit. But Novosound has grown that whole 0 to 1 million founder-led sales by going out and meeting people and talking about, because especially in America where, I don't play golf. I'm probably the only Scottish entrepreneur that doesn't play golf.
You've met the other one.
No.
Well, I lie. in Clydebank there used to be a great course called Jurassic Park.
Oh, nice.
With dinosaurs and stuff. That's my level of golf.
That sounds great.
Was told never to take a client there, but
That's bad advice. Don't listen to that.
I know. You don't need those people in your world. What was I doing? But anyway, in America, that's the culture is all kind of you show up at pubs, restaurants, and you do business over dinner or drinks. But then it's also got so much more of a culture of intros and lead. They know me, so they intro me to that person, and then that, and we've got a lot of new clients just by who we know is. It's very insular in terms of, but if you're in the right level of the businesses and the right sector, it grows that way, and you can't do that via Zoom call because the Zoom call just becomes, maybe you get a 30-minute Zoom conversation with this person, fatigue on it, so it just never seems to go anywhere. Whereas when you're actually out there having dinners, going to events, you meet a lot more. And America in particular, I've noticed, thrives on that kind of business relationship. So probably half my time is spent over there at the moment. Yeah. So.
You're going to America, Paul. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, cheers guys. See you later.
Sorry, Megan.
But I also think in America, it's not where, I think in Scotland we have a view that for startups and a lot of the national innovation strategies all go to Boston if you're life sciences, go to Silicon Valley if you're an app. I would get away from them, and we do a lot of business in Ohio, Texas, so Houston, Texas is like mini Scotland. No, Scotland's like mini Houston, Texas, because Houston's actually, the metropolitan area's actually got a larger population than Scotland, but in one city governance. Wow. And they've got oil and gas, like we've got Aberdeen, they've got healthcare, like we've got the Queen Elizabeth, and they have aerospace, NASA, and we've got Prestwick. So they've got the same 3 core industries, but in one city. So if you get work in there, you can actually do all the work that you try and push in Scotland, but in the Houston. When I'm over there, I have to say Houston because they don't know where Houston is. So that's the only bit of American lilt that I've kind of adopted just to make it easier. But if you do work in that city, you get all the benefits of what you get in Scotland, but in just one city government. So it's
makes so much sense. And from a relationship building perspective, you're absolutely right. We see success in that as well, and we've seen a lot of failure in that space as well, where a 30-minute Zoom call makes sense, but it's a hard stop 30 minutes later, and the conversation's lost, and there's a PDF to follow it up. But actually, it's the breaking bed moments that really allow you to build that relationship and allow you to, get the work right.
And it's rare you get connectivity problems when you're face to face as well.
Yeah,
whereas trying to do, especially time zones or whatever,
Depending on how much vodka you've had, I guess.
Well, there is that sometimes. But sometimes that makes better deals. But it's also if you're trying to be a global business, you don't want to have to do calls. And I have to do it when I'm over here. Where one call I did last week, it was me in Scotland, commercial partner in Salt Lake City, another one in Australia. Wow. And there, I can't actually work out what way the time zones were going because the Salt Lake City was like 8 hours behind me. Australia was 12 hours ahead of me. So they were actually, but I think they were across I don't know how it was working, but I was 10 p.m. at night speaking to somebody first thing in the morning, and the other person at lunchtime. It was just, that's fine because we can, the connectivity allows the world to be smaller. But I'm not at my best at 10 p.m. at night speaking to somebody who's 6 in the morning. Whereas if you're all into one place, that gets removed and you've got that free-flowing conversation.
And I've travelled with work previously, and a lot of people will look at that and like I just did with you, so the glitz and glamour of it, the jet-setting lifestyle. You mentioned a second ago that you don't balance that very well. What is the plan? How sustainable is this sort of jet-setting lifestyle, and where does it take you next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning as I go. So that last trip I did there, that was from London through to Hong Kong, Korea, LA, New York, so it was just 3 weeks in one direction. And on that one, I started going to the gym a lot more. And I'm not saying I'm going to go and become buff or anything. It's like just literally that if I do 2 hours or an hour to 2 hours in the gym at the end of my day, 5 p.m. till 7, I'm not in the hotel bar. I'm not in a restaurant. You're just kind of biding time. Yeah. And I'm not in that sedentary, sitting on a plate and sitting in a meeting, sitting in an Uber. You're actually active. And I got back off that trip, landed in Heathrow on Monday, and then was straight back in the office on Tuesday, as if I hadn't just jumped through time zones. The trip before, on the other hand, was, and this is the round the world one that I did in October, I was not doing that. And I was kind of filling every single slot I could get with a meeting, and then that meeting might have to happen over dinner, or it might be a late night call back home. And just kind of, I came to a realization when I was really burnt out at the end of it, just like when I'm back home, I'm not doing a 20-hour day. So why am I doing a 20-hour day when I'm traveling, really good point, including the air travel and all the stuff? I got to a point where I was like waking up on Sunday morning in a hotel and thinking, right, I need to get up, need to go and do something. I can't waste this moment. And then thinking, well, when I'm back home on a Sunday, I'll lie until 11. Why do I feel that I need to burn myself out doing it now? So travel, I'm trying to get more into giving myself my me time. Yeah. The more of the kind of downtime that I get at weekends when I'm at home, and not just feeling I have to be constantly doing it. And then just eating better, going to the gym more. I wish I'd known that 7 years ago as well, because there is, a bit of a, when I started this, and I think you get it from other entrepreneurs and tech founders, that you want to burn out. It's that burnout culture of you always work hard. That's what founders, America has that horrible phrase of founder mode where you're just like on it. There's so many that just burn out quickly. Yeah. And if you're not at your best, your business won't be at your best. You'll have more of those explosions in the team and everything. So working on myself just to try and be a bit more, less fractious.
I think though early on though, that, I know exactly what you mean about that. It's almost like the harder you punish yourself, the more chance you've got you'll survive, and you can only think about surviving at that point because you're new to business and you're not seeing the in a longer term. And
you can't keep it up if you're constantly getting 3 hours sleep, working 20 hours, and travel on top of that, and then trying to do your business meetings, your emails, your phone calls back home, your family life, everything. You will burn out and it'll be horrible. I mean, you will. Luckily, we're doing the blood pressure monitor, so we can track when blood pressure is rising. That leads you to strokes. Yeah. And it's something that if you do it well and just get into mindset, and I know some CEO founders who are as much into long distance running, marathon running, swimming, sports. I've never been into sports, so even going to the gym is a huge lifestyle change for myself. But they do last longer than the ones who just go straight full pelt into it. And you have to be at your best so your business gets the best out of you as well.
It's that sort of entrepreneurial mindset as well. It's hard to switch that off, like you said a second ago about the sort of Sunday morning thing. How dare you go to Hong Kong and not go sightseeing, So it's about making the most of that experience, but also ensuring that your health is a priority as well.
Absolutely. And when I first started going to America, you're going to new cities for the first time because it's a new client that way. When you've been to New York 4 or 5 times, you start thinking, I know it. Or if you've been to a backwater town in Ohio, there's always the next time to go and see stuff. So allowing yourself just to push that FOMO out of your head, really, of I need to be there, I need to go and see a Broadway show, I need to do all this. And just relax and say, no, if you're back home, you'd be out walking the dog, or you'd be reading the newspaper, or whatever it is. And I do wish I'd kind of learned that before, but I get really bad FOMO sometimes when I just think I should be making more of this, I should be enjoying it more, I should be, if people are watching living vicariously through my Instagram feed, I have to give them a show. But then really it's more, no, dial it down and take care of yourself first and foremost.
It's what you said earlier about dressing a certain way or having to be a version of yourself that isn't actually the version that you would particularly like to be or be proud of. So, but I think as you go on further in this journey, you actually are able to dress the way that you want and be the way that you like, and that does feed into behaving the way in which you would like, regardless of what country you're in, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you get in a point, and it's going back to that whole thing about authenticity of be yourself, not like that. If you can create, and this is going to sound really fucking arsey, if you can create almost a professional identity of yourself, it's easier to leave that at the workplace. Absolutely, and get home and take off the outfit or slip in something else to be somebody different. I quite liked that at the start when I'd go to work with a shirt, maybe I didn't wear a tie but wore a suit jacket and stuff, and then when I got home I could just get that off really. But now the amount of energy switching between them, because one was so far removed from where the rest is, if you bring them together but keep them separate, it's a balancing act, but you get better out of it.
Absolutely. It's quite a dangerous game to play though when you slip into the wrong person.
The wrong person.
I've done that a few times when get told I'm talking to you like a member of staff. It's like, oh right, being too assertive here. Like this is a team game we're playing. It can be quite difficult like that.
Yeah, and I think if you're, as I say, it's being yourself, but the best person or best version of yourself for that situation. And I get it wrong a lot. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not the master of this by any stretch. And there's been a lot of people left in the wake.
You mentioned health earlier and strokes in particular, and then you touched on this blood pressure monitor, which I've been fascinated on reading on. I worked in health and fitness previously, and I guess forever it's just been these big ugly cuffs on an arm, making people feel really uneasy and uncomfortable, and consequently raises their blood pressure when they put it on. This is like groundbreaking stuff that you guys have developed.
We've been looking at it for probably the last 12 months or so, and it solves a large number of problems with these cuff devices. Most people have had the blood pressure taken at the doctor's surgery, and they put the cuff on, it inflates, and they go, and that changes, because white coat syndrome it's called. And then you might have one in your bathroom cabinet that you use every now and again, but there's just no way of actually doing minute by minute or 10-minute intervals of blood pressure, so we don't really know that much about blood pressure on a day-to-day. If you're in a hospital in an ICU bed, you'll have a catheter put in that can monitor it, and it's very invasive to do that. And then you can get more of a ups and downs of what the blood pressure is doing. But in a hospital environment, if we're just day to day, waking up in the morning, going to work, driving, road rage, or bad business meetings, bad team meetings, your blood pressure, some people's might go up, some might go down. People who faint, blood pressure dynamics is completely different to people who have constant elevated blood pressures. And knowing these deltas, ups and downs, we just don't have an input device for that at the moment. There are smartwatches that put a cuff on the wrist, but you have to tell it to take a measurement, which if you're in the middle of something, you don't, hang on a sec.
It's the last thing you're going to do. Right?
Yeah, in a stressful situation, it's the last thing.
Exactly, so the technology we're building has got no moving parts, so it's more like what you have on the back of your Apple Watch at the moment, and it can do it every 10 seconds. So therefore it just sits there taking the measurements. And we're looking at how when the heart beats, your arteries kind of expand, they contract, and you can see the heartbeat in the movement of the arteries. Ultrasound is all about looking in the body in a non-invasive way, so that's kind of, we're leveraging that technology, but putting in a much smaller, low-power battery kind of form factor to allow it to be integrated into smartwatches everywhere. So ultrasound integrated everywhere.
So is that the next step then?
That's what we're aiming. That's the big push at the moment, and we have the industrial side of the business. Is roughly about 30-40% of our revenues are industrial monitoring. It's a bit like wearables for pipes. So you strap ultrasound sensors onto pipes, monitor corrosion, put it to a cloud, look at a dashboard. The other side is strapping ultrasound sensors onto body parts, pump the data to a cloud, look at a dashboard. It's the same thing, but the use case is completely different.
It's incredible. I get, we've all got smartwatches. I think it was like polar heart rate monitors that invented the whole the heartbeat, resting heart rates and stuff. That was, at that time, really fascinating. But now we've got them all on our phones and watches. But the blood pressure movement there is like incredible. I mean, that could be so preventative from people having strokes and heart attacks. Absolutely,
and we look at it from the same way as like the pulse oximetry. In the past, you'd go to the hospital, maybe a box with a cable, and then they put it on, a nurse would come administer it. Then it gets put to a place where it's a small clip that you just put on your thumb, and you keep that in your bathroom cabinet. And then 10 years later, it's all on the back of your iPhone or back of your Apple Watch. Blood pressure, on the other hand, is still a cuff device on an artery. It's not had those steps down, and that's what we're really trying to push it through, that kind of roadmap to get it from hospital, GP, bathroom cabinet, back of your wrist, or other side of your wrist.
So that R&D innovation, how far along are you?
So we've got devices, and we were at CES in January this year doing demonstrations of ultrasonic blood pressure on the trade show floor. We're looking for partners at the moment to help us miniaturise the electronics and get it to where it needs to be. But we've got a platform we call Slange. You know, in the pub you go Slange, and that means good health. So our health platform, going the Scottish naming, is called Slange. And we use Slange for lots of different things. So we've got clients in Texas who are doing it for ICU monitoring for a specific indication. We're speaking to lots of other companies about what you can do with wearable ultrasound. So stopping ultrasound being a medical device that's expensive only in the hospitals, and move it on to what, you know, all the optical sensors on the back of your smartwatches are. Do the same with sound waves that has happened with optics. And blood pressure is just a really key part of that. When we went to CES 2 years ago, it was just a wearable ultrasound platform, and we thought we'd go out there with this platform, people would come and tell us what they want to do with it, they'd work with us and they'd develop that solution, and we were so wrong. So we just did not get it right. Everyone that came to the stand was like, can it do blood pressure, can it do blood pressure, can it do blood pressure? And we'd say, it can. If you work with us, we'll try and get it working with it. It goes, yeah, but how? And so, well, look, we think this is how it'll work. And it was, it's too early stage for us. It's just, so we came back from CES 24. I said, right, let's actually think about it. Can we actually demonstrate the algorithm, write an algorithm, demonstrate it? Within 9 months, we'd got about 10 milligrams of mercury accuracy on it, which to be a consumer device, you have to be below 7. So we've gone from 0 when we came back from CES in January 24 through to about the summertime, we'd got something working, and now we're down to about, I think it's about 5 milligrams of mercury with the portable device. So we're back at CES now showing people blood pressure, and also in the conversations, all right, we get it now. But that's 12 months of sales cycle and heavy innovation to get to that point.
But that's problem solving, right? Like if you didn't pay for that stand at the event and got that feedback, you wouldn't be on this course. And it's a lot of people could have looked at that in another way and gone, we went to an event, got no sales out of it.
Exactly.
We don't have what they want, and I think that's what success in business is. Right?
Absolutely, and it's very like what happened during the pandemic, where we had to say, right, hang on, this isn't working. Why are customers not biting their hands off for this? Let's think about what they're actually asking for. They're not asking for prototype industrial probes. They want products. Much like at CES, they don't want an R&D platform that they have to then develop. Yeah. They need more than just the hardware. They need the software. They need the screen. So we call it very much a sound wave to screen approach now, where some clients can do a lot more of the software upwards, and maybe there's stuff that you guys can do as well on the software side, but we now try and lead the customer much more towards where the value of the measurement is. None of our clients should be ultrasound experts. They should get the thing they want, and we should hide the ultrasound from them. So if you have a wearable ultrasound in your smartwatch, you'll never see an ultrasound picture, but you will see a milligram of mercury of your blood pressure, and that's what Novosound's trying to do there.
It's fantastic.
Wow. That's awesome.
What a story, man.
Yeah.
What a huge hand you've got.
I know, this is a glass of water for ants.
So started about 2018, seems to be going really well. We've spoken about resilience, we've spoken about success. What next? Where does it go from here, and how does it end? What's the plan?
I think everyone's got an exit plan.
You're selling it to Apple. You're selling it to Apple. That's
that would be the.
So if Apple are watching,
yeah, if Apple are subscribing to this, then they know where to find me. It's trying to work out how you get that ultrasound integrated everywhere, vision to reality. And the reality is there's 100 million wrists with smartwatches on them. How do we put an ultrasound sensor on each of them, whilst also maintaining the industrial side of the business, where there's, millions of pipes out there that need monitored. So how do we actually do both at the same time? So there might be a degree of restructuring, definitely an investment round, there'll definitely be a requirement for capital, but really Novosound's at this kind of critical part of the journey where a lot of the ideas we've had have physical deployments. We've got monitoring systems installed in Norway, we've got them in Korea, we've got actual technology out in the real world doing what it's meant to do. And this blood pressure thing is just, the door's just opening for it. And it's just about how do we best capitalise on that and make Novosound, the de facto ultrasound platform technology. Yeah. And if it comes out of Scotland, great. We've got the legacy of ultrasound in Scotland. How do we get it to the next level? So that's, I mean, I would just tell you how I plan on doing it, but then if Apple are watching, they'd have to buy me before they get that secret.
Well, fantastic innovation right here, eh?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's in Scotland, yeah, definitely. Beyond that, what do you do? What do you do next? How do you see your time being spent later down the line?
Yeah, I've loads of it. Some days I'm going to just go and buy a New York dive bar and do that for the rest of my days, if the exit's enough for that. I mean, more realistically, I only got started doing this because I got support from somebody who'd been there and done it before. So when I get to the end of this, I'll be probably take a week off or something, and then get back on the horse, really. I mean, I think the Scottish scene thrives on the recycling not only of capital but of knowledge. So people who have exited coming back, and helping the next generation come. I wouldn't be here in this phase of my life if that hadn't have been given to me at the start. So when I get to that bit, it's only right that I do it again.
And who were the people that helped you along the way?
Well, I mean, my co-founder Richard, obviously he's probably the one that got me started. But then, I still keep in touch. I was actually just out for a coffee with Stuart from Current Health, and go back to the story of back in 2014, look at dehydration that's been there, and they've obviously been tremendously successful. They're still out there, and it's just, you always look for the way of how can you pay it back, even at an earlier stage. There's maybe people that I mentor at the moment that when I'm giving them advice about salespeople or founder-led sales, in my head there's a wee voice saying, yeah, but you've not done it yet. You're not quite there. The perception of successes means, it's the eye of the beholder almost. So I don't think you're too early at any point to give back to the community, but there will come a point where I'll actually maybe feel comfortable in my own skin that what I'm saying comes from a position of success. Yeah. Probably don't feel that at the moment that I'm at that point just yet. Okay. But maybe give it a week.
Yes, anything now, right?
and I don't know how unique that is to Scotland or not. Like, I've felt exactly the same, where it's people pulling you up to be successful. They're trying to make you avoid all the landmines that you'd normally walk on. And obviously you still walk on some, and then they can kind of cast that back to you, going, remember a year ago I told you about that one. I'm like, absolutely. Do you remember that? That happens all the time on my board normally. But yeah, it's I don't know if that's unique to here or not.
I mean, Scotland is a tremendous place to start a business, and I think that comes from just the sheer amount of support that is here to, not only from all the public sector. I think there's 450 support agencies to get business started, but then there's all that conversation that goes, people keep in touch a lot more here. We're very kind of, I'm not sure if it's just a shoulder to cry on, or it's like all these groups. I think there's about 4 WhatsApp groups on my phone, all filled with different types of entrepreneurs, all sharing ideas. So it is very supportive. But I think there are gaps in what we do in Scotland. And we recently did a webinar about is Scotland the next Silicon Valley? And the answer is no. Any headline that has a question mark, the answer is no. So Scotland is not the next Silicon Valley. But I do think we can learn a lot from it. And one of the biggest things is in Silicon Valley, there's this whole culture of being tested in the valley. So if you're a software company creating a new app or a scooter ride sharing thing, the people who you get your first customers and the people who you prove your product with are also in the valley. They buy from each other. Mm. So what I'm trying to do in Scotland is use that same method, mentality that there are some things that just don't exist from a Scottish company, or so you have to go outside. But for example, for our industrial monitoring hardware that's installed out in Korea, we needed a dashboard and a cloud infrastructure. We could do it ourselves. We could go to Airtable out in Silicon Valley and just knock something up. But in Glasgow, there's a company called Bellrock. And if we buy from them and create a Scottish partnership, it becomes tested in Scotland rather than it being. And I think that's a bit of the mentality of Silicon Valley that I'd like to see more companies do. There's inherent risk in it because you're testing an untested, an earlier stage product. Yeah. But if you both succeed, then the whole country gets that kind of baseline up as well.
It helps that kind of partnership, though. That's one of the reasons we Clear Sky as a company has grown mostly in Scotland. Yeah. But like we said about the sales relationship side, also that kind of partnership side as well. Yeah. Because that's how you can have that quick back and forth conversation where, something's going wrong as a partner, let's fix it together, instead of, whenever I've kind of used more like a further away offshore kind of company, it's always been a bit more, we'll jump on a quick Zoom call, and you're like, you're not understanding this problem that I've got and how important it is. It's, you know.
And that has been one of the benefits with Bellrock, is that, you know, we're based out in Motherwell area and they're in Glasgow. You're 20 minutes just to get that conversation or send their engineers out to us physically to work with our engineers. As I say, there is risk because these are both, you know, our technology is just starting to get proven. Theirs is a bit experiment, you know, so, but you're going on that journey together. So then if we both, you know, if Novosound then starts getting massive deployments all across Korea, so does Bellrock. Yeah. And then Bellrock can use this going the other way as well. So there's a lot of benefits to doing it, but I'd just like to see it happen more often, really. And I know in like Clear Sky, it's Scottish customers you have, and perhaps more than partnerships, where we are paying Bellrock for services, but it is much more a partnership than something else, really. And if there were we also work with i4 product design a lot, but more on a supply chain type thing. But if there were more startups providing something that we would need, I would go out my way to use them rather than going for a more established one that's outside of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Awesome, yeah.
Cool. Is there anything you'd like to cover that we've not touched on?
I think we've covered a lot. I can't actually remember. There's a lot of rambling going on.
No, it's fantastic. Honestly, this is just like therapy for me. I'm like, other people have had these same problems and also got them wrong multiple times. I was like,
reassuring, isn't it?
It's one of those kind of you get all the websites like entrepreneur.com, and the articles that tend to come out basically say, it's always got a picture of like Steve Jobs and goes, the one mistake Steve Jobs made, but he was successful. You go, well, it doesn't fucking matter. It's like, just because he made the mistake and I'm also making a mistake, I'm not the next Steve Jobs. Yeah. You know, so it's, we just need to avoid those type of articles in Scotland.
Yeah. All day long.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.